Thank you, everybody. It's lovely to be here. First of all, in legal services, unlike the other speakers, we don't offer discounts, okay? So just for those who were expecting that, it's not happening today. To introduce myself properly, thank you very much. It's Zaim Sufi. I'm a partner, as my leader said. A little bit about the firm, very briefly, and the panel will have an opportunity to introduce themselves. So I'm part of an outfit called Denton's, a global law firm. Relevant to this room, some of the recent work that we've done includes some work for the Energy Crisis Commission, working under the aegis of the presidency, in relation to feed-in tariffs in particular. I'm also joined by members of my team and one of my partners at the back. Our joint work includes, or in his case, the work includes also on the Oya and Umoyalanga hybrid project, where we delivered 203 megawatts, and that's, I hope, part of how we're going to keep the lights on in future. And then finally, and last but not least, for those complaining about grid access, please don't blame me, but do know that we had something to do with it, because we helped advise Eskom as one of our core clients in relation to the shall we say, the new rules which have created a bit of a talking point. But enough about me. You didn't come here for me. I'm really, really happy. I'm excited to be joined by a panel of the highest order. These are individuals with collective experience of what, more than about 130 years, I think, in total, if I were to tally up. And if I've miscommunicated the age of one of you, I apologize. But my encouragement to the panel and to the room in particular, please ask questions. For that, we don't want this to be a lecture, we want it to be interactive. So ask questions, and in particular, if Alice is there, the lady who was walking around with the mic, I don't see her now, but she will reappear shortly. Please do ask questions. There is sufficient time for questions towards the end. What you're going to hear from the panel today touches on some core issues for IPPs and, to a lesser extent, the PPAs that flow from some of the activity which this panel does. We're going to hear about where are we as IPPs. Is it fool's gold or a gold rush? We're going to talk about the prospects in transmission and distribution. We're going to talk about something that this room has spoken about quite a lot, which is there an opportunity for collaboration? We heard the question come up when there was a discussion on standardization and standards, and although it's not quite the same for this panel, there are similar themes. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's get right into it. And before each of the speakers kick off, I'll ask them to literally take 10 or 15 seconds just to introduce themselves and their biggest achievements. So with that, let's start off with the first theme, which is the South African IPP space. Gold rush or fool's gold? For that, I'm going to hand to Adam, joined and supported by Glenn.
Thank you very much, Liam. So my name is Adam Griffin. I'm the Commercial Director for Norsk Renewables. I think I've been in this sector for a very long time, since about 2006, where I was working on utility scale billing. I was the Chief Operations Officer of a big digital utility where we managed just over about 2 billion rands with the South African municipal billing. I then moved into the trading space, acquiring a trading license for N-Power Trading, and then moved up north to our Norwegian brethren, where I'm now bringing a number of projects online for them. You know, interestingly, we talk about fool's gold or the opportunity, and I always say to people, what is a gold rush if you don't know what the price of gold is? And I think one of the biggest problems we have in our market is that we don't have much price discovery. So as IPPs, you know, we currently don't have a market where we can see the forward pricing of energy, either blended or individual. And for IPPs, you know, and the IPPs that are going to win, for me, it really comes down to what is your business model. Now, we've seen an evolution of behind-the-meter players in the CNI space. We've seen some of those, like the Solar Africas of the world, evolve into utility-scale IPPs. But really, the way that we look at it and the way that I see it evolving in the market is, how do we need to progress into energy as a service businesses? So, you know, we have our utility scale IPP players. They're generally international players. As South African businesses or South African localized IPPs, we want to talk about things like standalone power systems and microgrids or maxi grids. what does it mean to be an energy as a service company rather than being an IPP, and what is the difference in that? So business model is really going to form a big part of the success of what the IPP looks like in the future. And we talk a lot about security of supply in South Africa, and a lot of businesses have been developed off of the issue of security of supply. But we need to remember that the just energy transition in South Africa is a trilemma. It's security of supply, yes. There's decarbonization, but there's also affordability and access. So how are we developing business models around the trilemma of the just energy transition in South Africa instead of purely looking at security of supply as your driver for your business model? And I think that's a very important aspect for us all to sit on, either in the utility, the maxi grid, or the mini grid sort of IPP space. So then what does it mean to win, I suppose, as an IPP? You don't know what your prices are going to be. There's increase in competition. What's your cost of capital? What type of technology are the banks going to be able to bank? And for me, it comes down to about 4 key drivers for the IPP model, which is, how do you perform, and what is your fit versus the form of the market currently? We're now dealing in a world where the transmission, the TSO or the NTCSA is developing the market code. So how we interact with customers is going to change. How does price discovery is going to change drastically? Who we sell to, selling more on a basis of a wholesale market versus directly PPAs with customers. When are the retailers, or when will retailers come in and start playing and be able to buy from the market? How do we compete? Do we actually know how we compete with Eskom and compete with one another? So we try and compete on Megaflex, as an example, to certain customers, but those customers only get rebates on WEPs. What is happening with the wholesale electricity price? What is happening with Eskom's retail plan? So all of these uncertainties mean that we have to be good stewards of the energy sector or the energy supply industry, but it requires a lot of competition, which I think we're going to talk about. And then it's having a customer-driven approach, which I think the behind-the-meter players do really, really well. But to be customer-driven really means communicating what the now is in terms of the behind-the-meter opportunity, increasing renewable energy penetration through wheeling. But what is the true cost of wheeling for customers? What is going to happen when we start looking at unbundled tariffs and the distance from you as a customer to your generation source that you're purchasing on a big power purchase agreement? What is that really going to mean for you as a customer, where you're going to have to wheel a very, very long distance? And then the last thing I think for us is, where do the aggregators and the traders play? And where is the opportunity for utility scale to be able to increase liquidity and optionality for customers, giving customers choice? But where is the optionality, and where do the behind-the-meters players sit? How do we create hybridized solutions where the behind-the-meter smaller IPPs can take over a customer's bill, and to create a digital utility offering as a service rather than a pure play wheeling or a pure play financed solution?
Thank you very much, Adam. I'm Glenn. I'm from Broadreach. I've been in the renewable industry since 2008. Started off in the solar water heater rollout with Eskom, and more recently I've joined the IPP space, first with Sun Exchange, now with Broadreach. At Broadreach, we are more a C&I player. However, we do have a couple of smaller utility plants in Namibia that we are owning and operating. And this is really where I feel there is an opportunity here in the South African market. The IPP space in South Africa at the moment is dominated by international players. And I think as the market develops and we move towards a smarter grid, where IPPs can have more access to distribution points, South African businesses or South African IPPs can develop further and actually start to take some of the market share, especially in the smaller IPP space. We know that the larger utilities space is is dominated and it's quite a difficult game to play in. But as South African businesses are growing with the development of this market, we see our balance sheets are also growing with that and allowing our businesses to take on those smaller utility opportunities. And this also comes in with the opening of the market for municipal customers and allowing us to take advantage of those distribution points there. And really in the end, what we are going to be looking at is wrapping the entire energy consumption of a customer in an energy as a service model, not only what we can offset with the renewable system or what we can offset with the hybrid system at the moment. My experience is really building a lot of mini grids, so we are able to take on quite a bit of the client's consumption now, but as we develop, we'll be able to take advantage, for example, as with wheeling, building these smaller utility plants, getting access to the grid, and then taking over more of the customer's consumption there.
I think it's important, Glenn, what a lot of people don't realize is that us as IPPs are generally fighting over the same Eskom connected customers. And Eskom connected customers make up about 49% of the total customer pool. So we have a thinning market where we don't know where prices are going. We are all chasing the same customers. And what we are working really hard on and what we are collaborating as an industry, you would have heard from Francis Jackson earlier from the Energy Council, is how do we create fair and equitable access so that we can provide all customers with affordable energy, the same type of pricing that you get being a big bankable utility scale customer. So how do we make those municipalities bankable? How do we make them contestable in the new market? How do we get access to those municipalities where the revenue model of the municipality remains intact, but we are able to provide customers with choice, and we are able to create accessibility as IPPs.
So Adam, I think without going too far in that, and perhaps turning to Bart and Rene and perhaps Dustin, so if you could pass the mic along, that would be great. So you've spoken about scale, you've spoken about technology mix, right? But let's talk specifically about channels. So where's the sweet spot, Bart, to use those words? Is it REAP? Is it private PPAs? Is it multilateral wheeling? Is it trading? Or all of the above?
Thanks, Aim. So my name is Bart Haverkamp. I'm the Managing Director for Enanet Global. We're an IPP mainly focused on mining and minerals, and we try to build hybrid systems into this industry. Decarbonizing the world's supply chains is our mission. So we focus mainly on private off-takers. So yeah, where is the sweet spot? Let me tee off with this in a bit of, I guess, perspective. Since the start of the REIPP program, does anyone know how many IPPs have been involved in this program? Maybe a guess? Anyone?
There is a discount on legal fees if you answer, so feel free to raise your hand.
Well, maybe the first question, how many people in this audience work for IPPs? Maybe just to get a feel. Okay. So I think since the launch of the REIPP program in 2011, 140 IPPs are involved in this program. So currently 100 are generating, another 40 are reaching towards financial close or are constructing. Some of them purely in the renewable space, some combine that with battery storage, and some also have a thermal element like diesel or gas into that. But this excludes the IPPs that are actually focusing on the private off-takers that you see in the C&I space, that you see in the mining and minerals like we do with Enanet Global. But as the IPPs mainly started in the REIPP space, what you see now is we are targeting different market segments. We'll have different specializations. So some it's still in the REIPP space. Like Saim said, some will actually focus on multilateral wheeling arrangements. Some will just go purely for private off-takers. And then again, with the whole mix of renewables or a hybrid solution or all of the above. So where is then the sweet spot? I think the sweet spot varies very much with these IPPs. What it means is the IPPs will actually have to choose their market positioning and their unique selling positioning into this market. So what you see is all those different IPPs will now face different business models. And as a result of those business models, will face different challenges. So if I touch upon the PPA, which is an energy services agreement, and the most common form you see in South Africa is a PPA, it still feels like a lot of the IPPs are reinventing the wheel, because we have to deal with different clients, different off-takers. And one of the big challenges for us is to really get more standardization into these into these PPAs, which will allow us to move a little bit easier throughout the whole value chain, because funders will have their own view. The EPCs will have their issues with the contract we impose on them based on these PPAs. So what really is the sweet spot, and how do we position ourselves in these markets? I think it's interesting to just hear 2 or 3 other companies. And René, maybe I can give the mic to you. What CVS is doing, what is your sweet spot, and what are your typical challenges to get to that sweet spot and to stay within, maybe?
Thank you, Bart. I mean, it's also always easy to have a discussion with a country fellow man. So thanks all, great to see you. I see some familiar faces around, always good. My name is René Lax, I'm heading up CVE South Africa. So like Bart, I also come from the dark side, started my career about 25 years ago at Royal Dutch Shell, but gradually moved into the renewable space, where I have been active for the last 15 years or so. CVE is an international IPP. We're active on 4 continents, operating about 800 megawatt of assets. Not only solar and predominantly also storage, but we also operate biogas plants and hydro, and we're tapping into the hydrogen market as well. Business models for RAI. In South Africa, we predominantly focus on the CNI. I'll touch upon that later. But in other parts of the world, we're more, I would say, geared towards micro-utility and community solar kind of projects in the US, Chile, Spain, and France. So where is our sweet spot? In all fairness, we're learning on the fly. I mean, we started in South Africa, I think in 2019, just before COVID, in the CNI space, mainly rooftops until, I would say, 1 megawatt. At that time, you still had that threshold in place. And as the, basically, as the threshold for self-generation actually has been lifted, we see system sizes growing dramatically. So I would say currently we build and operate about, I would say, 20-25 megawatts, predominantly for blue chip customers, as well as some farmers, agricultural and schools. But we see an upward trend in terms of system size and different business models basically appearing. Mostly, basically, I would say, on demand from our customers, being market players, aggregators that come to the market, or being customers, basically, that want to increase their share of renewable energy, predominantly solar, when you look at their energy demand. And I think it's also a nice place and a nice podium, basically, to share that we also recently have been awarded with 2 of the City of Cape Town tender projects, equating 65 megawatt, together with our co-developer Cosmic Energy. So we're also tapping into that new frontier now of municipal customers in terms of direct offtake, and that comes with new challenges, and some of them actually I hope to basically unpack and explore in this particular session.
So I think that's a perfect segue to Dustin. And Dustin, perhaps before you tack on to this comment and maybe the next question, which I'm going to ask, just a reminder to the room. So Alice is to your left at the back. Are there any questions from IPPs in the room for the panel at this point? If so, please just raise your hand so Alice can bring the mic across. Are there any questions? Just looking across. No? Okay, let's carry on. So, Dustin.
So my name is Dustin Bello, Head of Business Development at Enetrog, South Africa. I guess our claim to fame is Enetrog, we're an international IPP. This last year, we won our high shift and high fin programs, were COP28 top 10 programs. We're one of the first developers in Hendrina, in Mpumalanga Hendrina project, which we're taking to financial close at the moment. And I think to answer the question is, what is the sweet spot for IPPs? What do you want it to be? As Ander raised, you now have opportunities that you didn't have before. We had the REAP game, and that was all. With that, things have changed, and now you have to consider your business case. What do you want to do? Where do you want to be? For Enetrog, we try to focus on what is called combined power plants, and that's integrating renewable energy, storage, and potential power to X to create more of a dispatchable facility. So much more like what you would experience in your coal-fired plants, but from a renewable green perspective. So one of the challenges to that is the need for integration. You need multiple resources, multiple things integrating together and working in union. And that can be quite tricky. So I think this goes into our next question, is there room for IPPs to aggregate, to join hands? And what would that look like? I would say it's already happening. I think there's three major themes that we can talk about. One is you need a facility that needs to be operational. So there's development, there's construction, and there's operations. We are already collaborating as industries in these various segments, and with the move away from REAP, there's more opportunity to do so, particularly for smaller players and to facilitate smaller entrants into the market. The second element to me would be the sales side. We need to take our product somewhere. Where is that? And this is where aggregators are currently fulfilling a lot of those roles. And the traders in those markets will continue to expand upon that. And the third one, which I think is more interesting, which is still being explored and still new, is how do we collaborate on the grid side? And that's where I'd like to focus a little bit more. Is we know about transmission and there's distribution. What a lot of us are familiar with is collector grids. And this becomes our foundation for combined power plants as well. Typically, you would have a couple of PV panels or wind turbines connecting into one grid, and it expands and expands. In Germany, as an example, we've got a collector grid that's 40 square kilometers that connects a couple of 100 megawatts of power that can function in a fairly dispatchable way. The same type of thing is possible in South Africa and allows us as IPPs to join hands and work together to actually build out the grid. So the deep strengthening on the 765s, the 400 kV, that's going to be challenging for sure. But up to that 400 kV, the transmission levels, there's a lot that we can do, and the law somewhat enables it. It's a little bit ambiguous. Are you a distributor or are you a generator? And particularly if you want to be independent, that will be tricky to figure out. But I believe that's the next evolution where we can really work together to bring on generation quickly and efficiently. In some of the early studies that we've done on our projects, if we could facilitate collector grids with partners, we could reduce our grid costs from a 5.4 billion connection to around about 3 billion. Which is significant savings. We can change out functions in the way that it works. So this could facilitate smaller players coming in more easily. We could create different types of markets, feed-ins. There's a whole lot new world of possibilities that comes out of that that could be quite exciting to explore.
So Adam, I think perhaps just before you go, can I just check something or maybe you can take the question, Adam. But you made the point about, let's call it co-venturing on the balance sheet and the finance side. What about industry aggregation, lobbying? What about pursuit of regulatory change? Because quite frankly, you're only going to move as slow or as fast as the regulated environment, right? And so what about the non-financial elements of cooperation? Or maybe, Adam, you can pick that question up.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'll go back to, and I'll pass back to you. I think, you heard from the Energy Council today. What we talk a lot about in the industry is co-opetition. And what we are doing well in co-opetition is that we are sharing responsibility. Big IPPs are sharing responsibilities with junior IPPs on a technical level. So from EPC OM, who's going to do operations and maintenance, fundraising, equity participation. There's a lot of 50-50 transactions coming through, or 51-49 transactions. But on the regulatory space, we have very strong institutions in South Africa that are not capacitated. And we, as a part of the energy plans that are coming from the Energy Council and a number of the sort of not-for-profit organizations, there's a lot of work being done on things like secondments. Sasol did a fantastic job seconding engineers into the coal-fired power plants, which is a huge windfall in terms of the success of our availability of capacity in those power plants. So we need to keep having those conversations. We need to have the forums to have those conversations. And that's happening now with the systems operator. I wanted to add to what Dustin was saying, which is, it's an old saying that you can't manage what you don't measure. And one of the biggest problems that we have right now is that we do not have enough smart meter penetration for us to realistically be able to create the system that we need, an integrated system. And it's not a difficult solution. And the solution comes into, should municipalities be energy-centric, reselling electricity? Should that be their business model? Or should they be grid-centric, which is be a poles and wires business, charge us a fee for the transportation of power, harden the grid, offer us flexibility, offer us different product suites where the resale of energy is not your fundamental driver of revenue, which I think we will get to, but the first step is, like municipalities need to understand the cost of their grid. The last point I wanted to make, and it's very close, I suppose, to my heart, is that I strongly believe, and somebody said it earlier in one of the panel discussions, where we're looking about developing the industry, developing the market, and developing our capabilities as South Africans. There are a number of opportunities from the DTI, for example, where looking at how can we componentize and how can we localize some of the manufacturing in South Africa? How can we create jobs as IPPs? We import huge amounts of our equipment. Yes, we have to import things like trackers and panels, etc., but how can we componentize in this market? How can we localize jobs? How can we incentivize the industry so that we can slowly, over time, become the seed for the African renewable energy revolution, not just from an energy provision, but also from an infrastructure perspective?
So that infrastructure question actually leads us, and this is not scripted, ladies and gentlemen, this is entirely spontaneous. So that actually leads us to the very next subject. But just perhaps before we go there, just Bart, anything to add? Because you've also seen it from a different perspective, and by the way, you two are ex-oil and gas folk, and so am I. So I think we saw the transition probably sooner than most.
No, but I think where we need a lot of collaboration within the IPPs is in the development space. So I think we're all trying to find our feet and to see where we're going with all the authorities, getting all the right approvals in time, so going from a PPA to a financial close. I think what I see from a lot of my peers is we do believe we can do that in 4 to 6 months, and then the reality is actually quite different because we're dependent on a BQ process, a CEL, and that, for example, has quite a bit of variability, how long that would take. And I think we need to start working more closely together also with the authorities. My experience is the one-stop shop that is being, I think they announced that maybe last year as a subsidiary from the presidential office. They really help. So that's an organization, and it's headed by Annelies van der Merwe here. It's really an organization that helps you to get your permits pushed through, but also makes the authorities understand your timings, your needs, and what is required to actually get us through this development phase. And I think if we share our learnings in this phase, but not only amongst each other, but through that one-stop shop also to the authorities, they will also understand, because for a lot of them it's quite new. These markets also just opened up for IPPs like ourselves, and especially in the space where we're in, like the 10 to 100 megawatts. It's pretty new. It's new for Eskom, it's new for ourselves, and it's new for a lot of authorities. So if we bundle our forces there, I think that would be a great move forward in this industry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So given that we've got about, I think by my clock, 12 minutes or so, I think we're going to combine two of the questions. So perhaps next to Lee and to Glenn, or back to Lee and Glenn again, opportunities and barriers for IPPs in the transmission space in particular.
Sure. Afternoon, everybody. Just to give you a brief introduction to myself. So I've been in the industry since about 2008, almost always working in the consulting, engineering, or technical advisory space. So that'll be lenders, technical advisory, owners engineering, independent engineering, etc. And then most recently in ABL, I think our big numbers that we can talk about, we're supporting about 8 gigawatts of wind and solar in round 7. And we're supporting, well, we've worked in all rounds of round 3, currently working on about 10 projects, doing the feasibility studies and other various elements going into the bid for that. So just, I've got about 5 themes that I'd like to speak about, which I see as key barriers, but there are opportunities as well, and we keep talking about collaboration, and I think this is the fundamental underlying principle for all of this being unlocked, because we tend to just point fingers at the government and Eskom, but the more we disaggregate this market, which is a positive thing, we're also depowering them from taking decisive action. So with that shift in market dynamic, we need to realize that the private sector and triple P operations really need to come into the picture. So fundamentally, I think for me, the NTSC doesn't have, the NTSCA doesn't have the capability and capacity to develop, finance, and construct energy transmission infrastructure and upgrades. So triple P is going to be necessary for this moving forward, to finance as well as develop and plan and so on. And with this, as we've now disaggregated Eskom, who, obviously we still have the GCCA and so on, but really is the NTSCA the party that should be planning the grid infrastructure expansion of the future? Because the private sector market, the developers and the IPPs are the ones hunting around for projects, looking for opportunities for offtake, where the new areas are going to be for development and so on. And these are not going to be your traditional areas where we've just had, say, the Northern Cape corridors or the Eastern Cape for wind. Things are going to be fundamentally different. So how does the NTSCA know this now if they are not, linked to a generation element of Eskom anymore? So we need to come to the party on that. So definitely the work that Francis is doing with the Energy Council, as well as the grid groups within SAPIAs and SUIAs. This is, I think, where we're going to start to see that facilitation being very important, and developers and IPPs need to be participating in those organizations more closely. Second theme I'd like to touch on is we've got the CL and the budget quote process, which we know is notoriously difficult, time-consuming, very risky, very uncertain, and to the extent where now as a developer and IPP, you almost certainly either have to have a dedicated internal grid development team or have specialist consultants bundled into your development process to second guess what Eskom is going to give you, because you cannot wait 6 months to get a CL and only then find out that there's like 700 kilometers of 756 or whatever that has to be installed for your project to make sense. So you've got to know this ahead of time, and you've got to be able to challenge Eskom on it. And also with that, the collaboration opportunity there. Remember, Eskom has got to deal with these projects on a case-by-case basis. It's not their job anymore to strategically optimize and think about this. So who's going to do this for Eskom? We need to start taking the responsibility on that ourselves and collaborating between IPPs and the industry bodies, as I've said, to help Eskom optimize this and meet them halfway.
So just a reminder, I've been shortchanged even further by all
5
accounts.
minutes.
So we've
last
literally
one
down to a few minutes.
So the last one, I think, on municipalities. I don't think municipalities are equipped at all to be providing grid connections and grid infrastructure upgrades and things like this in the future. I mean, in the far future, we're going to see distribution network operators like we see in mature markets around the world looking after this, and maybe municipalities essentially will just have to look after maintenance and operations. But infrastructure upgrades, off-takes, all these kinds of things, municipalities for me is not where it's going to be at. And then just very lastly on the opportunities for IPPs to get involved in transmission and distribution. So although theoretically some of it is possible in the future, transmission, almost certainly in the current framework, is not going to be an investment opportunity unless we unlock a triple P mechanism. Distribution potentially can be, but we've got policy hurdles to get there, and they're obviously completely fundamentally different operational models to generation. So the financing schemes, the offtake, the pass-through of revenues and so on is going to need a completely different model. And again, I think it's up to IPPs, developers, industry bodies to come together and collaborate on this.
Thank you. I think, Glenn, you wanted to add something?
So yeah, just to add a short view on that. So we will need a effective transmission operator, and I think that having an effective transmission operator will allow IPPs to focus on what they do best. And if we look at on the generation side, we can one of the biggest risks in one of these projects is the timelines. And a lot of times we have a generation asset that is, our returns are linked to the project timelines, which actually the asset could outlive that timeline much longer. And if we had a bit more time with that, we could de-risk the financial aspects quite a lot. And then on the other end of it, we could build a much stronger retail outlet where a customer can decide on a electricity supplier. You just tick a box, you can get Lee electricity, and so on. We're a lot more competitive over there, and all of this will help to solve the energy crisis that's in South Africa at the moment. And hopefully that then brings in more growth in GDP. People say that if you solve the energy crisis now, we can grow the GDP by another 3% already, and that can roll and roll. So it's definitely important for the transmission network to be something that is well managed, and with that also the regulatory environment needs to be quite clear, because this is also, like you're saying, we don't know whether we're going to get a surprise from our cost estimate letter or budget quote. That, after years of work, you can kill a project. So the regulatory environment and the uncertainty that goes with that, it's stifling the market at the moment, and we can't. A lot of projects are sitting there because we cannot go further.
Thank you. Glenn, so before we go to Renee, and we're going to do a quick whip around in terms of one-line pearls of wisdom, but I just want to check in with the room again. So Alice is standing there. Is there any question from anyone in the room? I see there's a hand up, Alice. There's a gentleman, third row, hand up. If you could just very quickly identify yourself, and then off you go with the question. Thank you.
Brian from Solenzi Power. I just have a question for the various IPPs there. What are you doing in terms of innovative strategies or innovative ways to ensure that the project, or rather the PPA that's being developed, it lasts a bit longer than what is anticipated through forming a good relationship with the landowner? So what are the incentives or benefits in terms of your innovations that you're looking to apply in the future to ensure that landowners are not only taking center stage in terms of the project, because without them there's no project, but basically they benefit to ensure that we can extend the PPA period when we need to?
Renee?
Yeah, until date, the vast majority of the PPAs that actually we have managed to execute, the landowner is also the off-taker. Right, but we see more and more also in the CNI space that the off-taker basically want to expand the PPA and sell on power to third parties, or make the land available for alternative developers or other IPPs. And our contracting is very flexible in that respect. So we can cater for that, in particular where we deal with blue chips. But it's also fair to say that rethinking the PPA is, I think it's still in its infancy. So there's a lot of development still going on. The key question always with a PPA is the underlying security from either an equity partner or a bank. So starting to basically renegotiating or restructure a PPA really takes time. And that's something I'm experiencing right now. I'm in the middle of the financial close, where we basically bringing projects at RTB phase, but also projects that are already operational for a year or so. And with a partially new equity owner, you have to really start from scratch again with your off-taker, which is a very lengthy process.
I would just like to add, you mentioned directly on landowners. you know, I think that the evolution of landowner participation has changed. A lot of the big REAP projects, especially in the Karoo area, developers went, they were paying about, it was as low as 6,000 Rand. A rental a hectare was very much a rental-based model. We're now seeing prices up to about 23 to 2,500. But most interesting for landowners is that a lot of landowners now, with the developers that come to those landowners that then sell a project to an IPP, they are baking in a percentage of revenue into that model, which can be up to about 2%. So we are seeing a lot more savvy landowners. But the most important thing, and especially with regards to previously agricultural land that needs to be rezoned, is what we definitely, what we consider at Norsk, is what do we do with the land after the project, right? And I think that is the fundamental question that needs to be addressed. We do a lot of projects up in Limpopo. Yes, we have a lot of the environmental impact studies. We understand the ecosystems. But what do the ecosystems offsets look like now when we develop those projects? And what do the ecosystem offsets look like in the future? So as a landowner, it's not just about what are you going to get. It's about how are you going to transform your land afterwards. So, and that's as an important conversation.
So Adam, I'm getting dagger stares. So I'm going to ask if it's possible. If there's one final question in the room, if not, we're going to do literally the 15-second snap. One, okay, all right. So we're going to go to the 15-second snap, and the question goes as follows. From your perspective, if you had only one thing to say as an IPP or for IPPs, what would it be? Adam, you've got the mic, go for it.
I would say that IPPs need to be accountable to the just energy transition, accountable to the communities which they serve.
Okay.
And we need to build trust. There's not been a lot of trust in the private sector in South Africa, and as IPPs in a growing industry, we need to build trust with the public.
Yeah, mind me, it's a brave new world. What's worked before is not necessarily going to work going forward. We need to look at new ways of doing things.
Thank you.
I would just have to say that IPPs should stick to their knitting. There's quite a bit of segmentation within the IPP space, and when you try to play in a space that's not really where you are an expert in, it can cause a bit of a risk there. So yeah, stick to your knitting.
Yeah, I just say on the grid elements, you know, almost all the CLs and you know things that are coming out these days, you've got upstream works contingent on other projects happening. Reach out to those developers, open up and engage, collaborate, and that will unlock things strategically.
I think there is room for collaboration here. I mean, we're up for a monumental task in South Africa, bringing, I think, about 20 gigawatt of renewable power on the grid, according to IRP in 2030. So there is, first of all, no time to waste, and resources are scarce. Not only financial resources, but particularly the human resource factor is really scarce in this country. So I would say work together, and maybe this session is a nice start of that, actually.
Yeah, I would say pretty much the same, René. I think partnerships and collaboration, and that also goes with the authorities. So treat everyone with respect. I know it's sometimes frustrating, but if you treat everyone within the authorities, your EPCs, your fellow IPPs as a partner, and work together and with respect, I think we get much, much further. So that would be my closing thoughts. Same.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to close with remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, that was an excellent relay just ahead of the Olympics. If you haven't had a chance to ask them the hard questions, you still have a chance over lunch. And to the panel, thank you very much for the experience, the insights. You guys were great. Thank you. Please, a round of applause.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give them another round of applause.